All right, buddy. How you doing? Mark Ross, ITK Radio. It's Friday, June 30th. Oh my God, Tour de France starts tomorrow. Very excited about that. Joining me today, West Coast, Best Coast, Adam Probolsky. How you doing, buddy? What's happening?
Good to see you, Mark. Fantastic.
Looks like you got a little June gloom.
Yes. We don't get the hot summer weather until like August here.
So delightful. Before we got on the phone, I spent a few years in California and got to know Adam out there. And I'm a block from the Pacific. I'm a block from the Potomac River. In fact, I can see the Potomac River on my back window here. Nowhere near as majestic as the Pacific Ocean.
It's an amazing place. Every time somebody knocks California, I tell them it's okay. You don't have to come. We got plenty of people, plenty of commerce, but it is pretty amazing place.
No, the first time I saw that part of the world as a kid, who grew up in Michigan in the Midwest, I was blown away. Or like the first time I saw UCLA in my 30s, I was like, this is amazing. Anyways, yeah, let's get right into it. I mean, your background, you're a polling expert, strategic advisor, communications pro. You've worked on campaigns, you've done it all. But now you're really helping, I would say, understand what is happening, what people are thinking, and then giving people advice to execute on that.
Yeah, we get to get a sense of what people think and also the emotional drivers behind behaviors and things like that. As a pollster, you got to kind of, it's part math, part art, part psychology,
Yeah, let's talk about just polling in general. I mean, I think just in our world, or working on campaigns and doing public affairs, we interact with smart people like you all a lot. But the average voter, I think they know two things about pollsters. Either they're trying to communicate with them to get them to answer questions, or they read about how polling is always wrong. Like the pollsters were wrong, they got it wrong. But let's talk about what really polling is all about.
I mean, we don't get it wrong, and I'm not like I do think we're better than everybody else, but in general, we've got some great a great pool of pollsters in this country, and I respect them all, the ones that are trying to do it right. But the key is national polls have had problems. There's no problem predicting outcomes in California or in Texas or Florida. We know what's going to happen. And so it's hard on a national basis because that's not how elections are run. And you have this media culture that tries to do this aggregation of polling, which is, you can come up with 1,000 analogies, but if you put a milkshake and a steak and a zucchini in a blender and mix it all up, no one wants to eat that, and that's pretty much what the media does. They take these polls from 6 different pollsters that have all kind of disparate components to them and put them together and pretend some average is going to really mean something.
Man, I'm actually that's a fantastic description. I've never thought about it that way, right? Yeah, because I think the cool thing to do is be like, oh, I went to Real Clear Politics, the polls,
right,
to find out what's going on, and you drop that at some cocktail party. But you're right. I mean, they're all made up differently. They all have different things they're looking for, and that's not the way to read polls as a consumer, right, or as a voter.
Well, and certainly not as a campaign or a corporation or a nonprofit. Whoever's paying for it, they're not reading polls that way. They're reading their own poll that tells them what's happening.
So talk about how I'm interested in the client acquisition. Like, are you out there talking to people like, hey, we can help you figure out X, Y, and Z? People are coming to you, and just talk about once you decide to work with somebody, especially if I'm hiring a pollster, I'm hiring you. Like, what's the best way to work with a polling firm or a polling professional?
So yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously we've been around for a long time, for decades.
1992, I just read, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, I started the company as a kid. Now
the wall. I mean, it's like the wall came down in '89. I was like, right. You've been doing it for. I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah. Now we're a woman and Latino owned company. So we've kind of grown up a little bit, but look, so we have a lot of people just calling us because we've been around for so long and have long-term relationships. So I think you and I have known each other for 20 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So So that's kind of one way, and that's kind of pretty typical for a long-standing business. But we respond to a lot of RFPs, requests for proposals,
Oh, interesting.
which some consultants and pollsters don't like to do, but we love it. We've got a great way of doing that and getting some good business that way. And then proactively, we're reaching out to the world, to everybody in the verticals that we do business with. So it's kind of like a lot of other businesses where you're going to find the business in all the different ways that you can get it.
What's the like? So once I hire you, like, what's the best way to work with you? I mean, like, what as a consumer of polling data, like, what questions should I be asking, or how? I mean, I assume you've got clients that are much more sophisticated, or maybe they need some that need more handholding, or some that are just clueless, and maybe they want affirmation.
Well, let's say, yeah, I mean, let's say you're VP inclusion or something like that at a major brand in the US, and you're trying to figure out if you're hitting the spot on your messaging, and if your DEI program is going to resonate with the public, or where the public's going. I think a lot of brands are wondering, am I putting the pride flag out front or not? Am I
right.
partnering with that influencer? How do I and how do I do it that's true to the organization and true to our consumers and things like that? So that example, we'll start talking to you about, okay, what are the questions you think you want to ask? What are the assumptions you have about your public, about your consumer, about your brand, and what are the questions you want to know? So we always tell people to answer the kind of fill out these two questions. I think that, and just write, the 20, 50, 100 things that I think, my assumptions, and then I wish I knew, right? I wish I knew if they were going to stop coming if I did this or that. And so those are the kind of the good way to start. So we do a download. Like we'll if for a corporate client, we'll say, give us every comms you've put out in the last year.
Right.
Give a link to all your news clips, things like that. Same thing for a government agency or even a candidate, quite frankly. Give us all your background, and we will digest every bit of that and find the things that we need to test and understand.
How do you, I mean, you're a professional at this, but how do you stay disciplined to yourself to not bring your own biases, your own opinions, or maybe your expertise or knowledge? I mean, how do you try to stay clean and pure and, be like, I'm looking at this for the first time?
So, I mean, I actually don't necessarily think that you need to be unbiased.
Okay.
My job is to bring life experience to the table. So, we have to ask some questions that are antiseptic, that don't have aren't motivating one way or the other, just to get a base sense of things. And as professionals, we know how to do that. And we've got a big, very diverse team. That's the one thing that I think is pretty cool about our organization. And I think probably a lot of pollsters have this, where we've got people of all walks of life in our organization, all educated, but coming from different backgrounds. So we check ourselves. We have an equity officer at the company who is constantly filtering everything we do to make sure we're being responsive to all communities and we're being inclusive. So there's some steps we take, but in a lot of cases, after we ask that initial question, what do you think? What do you know? We ask the why, and then we ask messaging questions that are really meant to be, quite frankly, biasing, if you want to call it that, or motivational, to push people in one direction or another, to see if they are taken by that and moved to action by that. Because that's oftentimes what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out, are you going to buy something if we push a message? Are you going to elect someone if you get this sort of message? Are you going to recoil if you hear this on the news? So we need to test those things.
I want to I'm curious. There's two things I'm curious about, because I guess you're right. I mean, you've been doing this. You're obviously a big consumer of news. Like you're, I assume, crazy observant. Like I assume going to the mall with you, you're just scanning, paying attention. So how do you yourself, or as a firm, wrestle with this kind of idea of explore versus exploit? Like, how do you explore for new data to make sure you're paying attention to trends versus exploit your knowledge and data to, because you've seen this before, so to speak? I mean, do you all wrestle with that?
I mean, I'm not so, in tune with that exploit. I'm going to look that up a little bit, Mark, but I guess look at it this way. Our job is to give you that foundational understanding and then tell you how to get from here to there, because most of our clients are trying to move along some journey. And so we're probably going to we're going to bring, obviously, our experience to the table. That's one really cool thing that pretty much every pollster has, is we've got this historical data on all kinds of subject matter. So, I mean, if you're good, you might want to call that exploiting, but we're taking that background and using that in the process to say, yeah, here's some of the things we already assume or we know or we have a sense of. We'll gut check it in the research, but I think that really brings a lot of value to the table, rather than, I don't see it necessarily as a negative.
You talked about the the explore exploit thing. I'm happy to send you stuff. It's like music, right? Like I'm like speaking in '92, like I'm still listening to the Joshua Tree. You too, right? Like. Right. I've been listening to those guys for nearly 40 years, but then, how do you discover new music, right? So it's like constantly, this idea of like, do I stick with what I know, or should I go, learn more about Taylor Swift or something?
Which, by the way, have you seen the NFL Taylor Swift, stuff going on right now on TikTok?
Oh yeah. The teams are, I saw you posted the Bengals, the Lions did a similar thing. Yeah, no, it's great.
Yeah, actually they're all doing it. It's really awesome. Really, really smart. So I love that concept. What we do today as a company, and this is, across the board organizations, looks nothing like we did 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And when it comes to reporting, when it comes to our modes of research, I mean, we evolve. And so I think that the one way we kind of make sure that we're in tune with the world is we're constantly changing. We're constantly, methodologically, we're never compromising. But beyond that, everything is on the table. Whatever, 100 years ago, you were just knocking on people's doors. And then, 40, 50 years ago, or even 25 years ago, you were calling them at dinner time. Now I can call you when you're driving to work. I can talk to you while you're walking the dog. I can text you at 8 o'clock and have you text me back. And so there's like really, a constant evolution of how we're connecting with people to get their opinions.
That's actually great. Yeah, it keeps it fresh, and I guess it forces you to be creative and go with the flow, so to speak. And there's this whole I guess you're meeting where the voters are, not where you want them to be, so to speak, right?
Exactly.
Or consumers are
that, and they're also in the way they want to communicate. I tell people all the time, if you pick up your phone, out of the last 100 times you used this thing, it went mostly 95 of them were something like this. Maybe 5 of them were something like this. I called someone yesterday, and I literally said, dude, I'm so sorry to go full boomer on you, but I had to call you and talk to you real quick, And
no, it's funny. I got a call this morning from a friend. I was like, "What is?" I was like, "What bad news? Like, this is so out of the ordinary." Like, that's funny. Talk about you mentioned the journey, like with your clients. What's like when should I like get a pollster or a strategic advisor involved on your side? I mean, is there? I guarantee. I assume you've had some crisis situations where you were like, "Why didn't you call me 2 weeks ago?" Or like, but is it just kind of the reality of the situation? But can you just talk about that? Like, is it before I go to market? Is it after I've gone to market, or is it just data is great whenever you can get it?
We love data regardless of how you get it. So if you, in the early stages of whatever you're dealing with, whether it's, real positive because you're launching something or you're dealing with a crisis, if you can start to collect data, that's super helpful for us. Obviously, if you can bring us into the room when your crisis is happening or when you're, designing your brand or when you're, developing your plan to build, a 1,000 condo tower behind me. All those things are pretty smart to have us involved early on. If not, obviously we'll play catch up. But yeah, you should probably have, when you hire your entitlement, consultant and your lawyer and your brand strategist or whatever it is, your campaign manager, consultant, you should be bringing your researcher, your market researcher, your pollster in the room at the same time. And that's the ideal scenario. And the smart pollsters know their role. So I know my role in any given moment in that around that boardroom table or on the Zoom. Largely, I'm going to shut up and listen and take notes. And if somebody asks, we'll give an opinion based on historical data and knowledge, or based on the data we actually collect for the client. But really having us in that room early on is probably pretty smart. But yeah, we've definitely gotten that call, 2 months into the gas leak, and 10,000 or 100,000 people are displaced, and we're playing catch up. So it definitely happens.
Can you talk your background? I think I don't know, maybe it is similar, but I mean, you literally started out as like a proper campaign operative, running campaigns, eating, bad pizza, and, trying to get people to vote for your crazy candidate. And now you're also a bipartisan firm, which I think is interesting. Like you're not assigned with one side of the aisle, you'll work with either people. And then can you just talk about your evolution to becoming a pollster, and then the client selection process? Is it more corporate now? Is it more politics, or does it matter? Or do you try to keep that balanced? Your kind of suite, or what am I trying to say? Your client portfolio, is it, one way or the other? Are you saying, hey, we want to be a bit more balanced in terms of our client selection?
Yeah. So yes,
that's like three big questions. Sorry, man.
Yeah, I think I have two of them on my head. You'll fix it.
I forgot. Well, I would have forgotten what I asked. So it doesn't. Whatever you answer will be great.
So I started as a political animal. I mean, I really was an activist in all senses. I mean, it meant something very different back then. But I was an activist and running campaigns and then or just volunteering, quite frankly, and then running them. At some point, I realized instead of being the internist or the general practitioner, I wanted to be the neurologist, and that's kind of what I decided. It just it made more sense to me to focus in on some part of the geopolitical public affairs government world. And so about maybe 8 or so years into my career, I said, I'm just a pollster. And that was a little bit rough because nobody knew I thought I was a pollster. I mean, most people don't just some people do. And I just decided it. And then nobody hired me for a few years, and that was rough. But eventually they bought in, and for the last 20 plus years, we've been, just doing polling. And so that was kind of it. I realized being a generalist was fine, but it wasn't what I wanted to do.
Right.
And then we did a lot of politics early on. Probably about a decade or 15 years ago, we realized that government was a real prospective place for us to do business, and so we kind of dove head into government. And I had a lot of land developer clients because they always have issues with getting approvals, especially in the West, and so that was a big part of our business. But we really started to smooth over and say, okay, we want to have a very diverse client base. So we've got a large government client base, decent sized corporate and nonprofit and labor, and then very little minimal amount of politics these days. I should kind of explain that all our clients have some interest in what the public thinks, and it all kind of oftentimes relates back to public policy. Even our corporate market research clients, at some level, there's some touch point to politics and government. So there's going to be some part of that, other than the pure brand related things we do. But so we've got a pretty good mix of all those things, but kind of less the hardcore politics stuff, the candidate work, just because that's they don't pay as well, and it's a little less fun than being in the boardroom or working for a government agency who's really advancing something really positive versus the one guy who's trying to get elected to Congress, and he or she the quality of candidate. I mean, come on.
Hey man, it's a representative government, so that's what I tell people.
Right.
No, and I think too, the short-term ism, especially of a congressional campaign or a state senator. I mean, they're 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, versus I assume some of your corporate clients, they're making bets that are 10, 15 years, or I mean, if you're building 1,000 new townhouses, that's a 20-year bet, right? So the I guess the money or the investment has got to be different in terms of the quality, not necessarily the quality of the clients, but just the investment dollars or the perspective.
You would think. I think it's hard sometimes for anyone to understand kind of how some people totally get it, and we've got great clients who totally understand the value of research and how it integrates with their communications, with their outreach, with the lobbying process or whatever it is for the media plan. And then there's a lot of people who don't. So yes, they've got $100 million project, but you tell them you're going to spend, $250,000 on research, and they whoa, that sounds crazy to me. Hold on a second. You just, you're spending, $5 million on engineering and $2 million on architectural design, and you're like, this process is going to inform all that work. And there's a chance that it doesn't go anywhere unless you have public support. So yeah, $250,000 is pretty normal.
Yeah, it is funny. Yeah, even some of the corporate stuff I do, I'm like, you probably spend that on napkins for your, coffee bar. So like, we're not asking like some, your paper bill is probably better. Can you, speaking about that, how do you, I always tell people like, this is my advice based on, my experience or what's happening in the world when I give communication advice. And my job is like, I'm going to put you in a position to succeed, but it's your final decision. Like I can't, how do you wrestle with that yourself as you've been doing this for a while now, and you give people the data, they don't like it, or they think it's wrong, or they're like, can you just talk about that experience and then just separating yourself from the outcome, if you will?
Yeah, that's sometimes difficult because people always want to know about your accuracy rate,
right?
Which given the chance to tell you, at a normal interval, let's say before an election, I can tell you exactly what's going to happen, barring things that shift in campaigning. But I'll give you a great example. We do a lot of work for government, and government wants to raise taxes, and part of the process is to understand what the public thinks, what the voters think, and do the research. And they have this desire oftentimes to do off-year elections. So it's 2023. You want to go out and be in front of the voters in November. Nobody's showing up in November. You know who's showing up in November 2023 is old people, old white people, and they're not voting for your tax. So now they're under pressure. They don't have the budget for what they need, and they need to approve the funds right now.
But yeah, Adam, can we I want to unpack that really quick. Just because it's an election doesn't mean every election is different. The makeup, the timing, the year. Is it a primary, general, off-year election? Yeah. So I think people are like, oh, it's an election. So
okay.
The voters are all the same. And you're like, no, the only people who are going to show up for this election are these people.
Exactly. And so I guess the point is I'm always going to push people or government agencies to push their tax or some kind of controversial thing to a presidential general election. That's where we have the peak turnout. And what happens in that is then you have all the disparate parts of your electorate showing up. So the old white people aren't going to have an outsized impact. And especially with a tax, guess who shows up to presidential, national elections is younger people who don't pay taxes or pay taxes at a much lower rate than the old white people do. And so they're going to be more willing to say yes to a tax. And especially if it's a parcel tax, let's say on property. Well, yeah, I'm young. I don't know anything. Yeah, tax the old white people. So that's, I think, the key there. We have that oftentimes where somebody says, "Oh, we got to go out in March of an odd year." Like, oh man, you're gonna lose badly. Like I can tell you, I don't even have to do the research. Let's just push this off. Take a loan, cut costs, whatever you got to do, so we can push this off to a general election. So things like that happen all the time, and the same thing with corporate clients or nonprofits who really have an agenda that they want to accomplish, and they do research because someone told them they're supposed to do the research, but then they don't execute based upon that research. It can be frustrating. We still get paid, but we may not get a call back after that from them, which is kind of frustrating. So yeah, we we push enough to get our point across, but at the end of the day, we are not the communications consultants. We are not the campaign consultants. We are not the lobbyists. We are a part of that process. And unless they're going to listen to us and marry that with the consultant who's going to take it to the next place, then it may not work so well.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned like client retention, and I'm just can you talk about those clients that I assume there's some clients that just or just people in general that jump like every year they get a new pollster every 6 months or and then you probably have some clients I assume you've worked with for 4 or 5 years, maybe a decade. Like, are there benefits either way, or like is it if I'm working with a pollster, is it better to have like a long-term relationship because we each know each other better, or does it matter because there's just a one-off situation?
Look, we like our longstanding clients, and we think we do a good job. We're not in some rut, all right? We do some innovative things, and we're constantly moving ahead with them, and we have good relationships and good communication. So there's, I think, a better outcome. I don't think there's some sort of rule that says you shouldn't, hire a different pollster. In fact, I think the way we look at it is we're not so in the business of poaching. So I'm not actively pursuing somebody else's client,
right?
Necessarily. But if I encounter a consultant or a corporate client or whoever, and who's got, say, hey, I've got a pollster, say, hey, great, make us number two, because there's always going to be a conflict. It happens all the time, actually, in our business. We've got really good relationships with our kind of colleagues or competitors, I guess you can call them. We recommend them all the time. They recommend us all the time because there's going to be a conflict and there's going to be an issue. So we have, I'd say, about, maybe about half a dozen to 10 or so pollsters that we have high respect for, that we will refer business amongst ourselves if we have a conflict. So we like to have we're fine being the backup.
No, it's a perfect segue because I wanted to ask you about like the polling industry, or the dark back rooms, where you guys all get together, smoke cigars, and I mean, is there like, are you sharing? I don't want to say client experiences, but are you sharing like the secret sauce of how you accumulate data, or is there, is there a gathering? Do you guys all get together and say, this is working, this is bad, like these clients are insane, or what's the fraternity of pollsters, if you will? Can you let me in on the secret society?
So I don't. There is the American Association of Public Opinion Research. It's our trade group that we do have. We have a listserv, kind of old school, but like the email is going to get shooting around every day. That is a pretty cool, helpful place because you can just throw something out there, say, hey, we're going to poll in Somali who's got some experience with that, or something more pedestrian. But that is kind of a cool place we get together. There's the Insights Association, where we is kind of more on the market research side, that has kind of a similar setup. And so that's helpful. I don't know, it's not a lot of dark back room, but we do that.
I mean, it's not like House of Cards on Netflix. It's not
right. No. But when we do kind of, I think, have some communication, like we partner sometimes with other pollsters depending on the project. But I think for the most part, it's a pretty happy, slap on the back kind of a group of people. Not a lot of cutthroat, where I think maybe in the consulting world or the PR world, it's, a lot more, we're competitors and we're going to duke this out. I don't think it happens so much in our business.
Yeah, I've spent some time around like pure advertisers or marketers, and it just seems, I don't know, because like maybe because they have to come up with an idea and then like sell that idea, but it seems like really almost, I don't know, aggressive. Like there's like catfighting, like my idea would have been better, I would have sold more Jello shots, or I don't know. It's interesting. As we wrap up here, I'm curious about, I want to finish up and talk about you as like an entrepreneur, and like, before we get on here, like just how you manage yourself and as an executive. But can you chat about, like, are you all in the field every day? Like, are you doing polling every day? Does it stop in August because it's summer, or like the last 2 weeks of December because the holidays? Or I mean, is it like, or is it just polling happening all the time that we don't even know? Like me as a consumer that I don't even know about, or is it ebb and flow like a seasonal thing?
Yeah, it's every day. I always get the
Wow.
question from the client, what's the right time? And I always say this: there's always a reason not to poll. It's the Super Bowl Sunday. It's Rosh Hashanah. It's like the day before
Yeah.
school starts. Well, whatever it is, there's always a reason not to. But that's a day. That's a moment in time. So like. Or my favorite is it's summertime. People are going to be on vacation. Well, first of all, like people work for a living. Nobody, people just like take off. This isn't 1920s Gilded Age. That
Yeah.
people go off to the island for like 2 months. I mean, people work for a living, and also we're so mobile. I don't care. Like we do work in the Coachella Valley here in California, or in other places in the country where there's like an influx of people coming in from, let's say, Canada, in Florida, or people coming in from the north into Florida for the winter, and so they're part-time residents.
Right.
I don't really care where you are. I call you on your landline, a few people on your landline, but most people I call on their mobile. And then most people I email and I text, and I get you by a social media ad, or I get you some other way. So I don't really care where you are, and I don't really care what the timing is. Yeah, I'm probably not going to call. We're not calling on 4th of July, but I'm going to call on the 3rd, and I'm going to call on an email and text on the 5th. So there's no real particular shutdown, because research always needs to be happening. Yeah.
And then are you dropping, I guess it depends what the client wants. I assume you're giving them, I guess, daily reports, weekly, monthly, quarterly, like whatever they want, or is the project, or how, like, is data every day like helpful for me, or is it situationally based?
It depends. So we do transactional surveys. So you're calling the call center and at whatever brand, and you're asking for some help, and the resolution of that call happens, and then you get a survey email or a text or something afterwards saying how'd that interaction go. So we do that, and that's just a dashboard, and we see everybody sees, the client sees, we see the data on a moment by moment basis to get a sense of what's happening. And then you get like real critical, like, that was a shit call. That gets put to someone who's going to just deal with it. But for the most part, when it comes to like public opinion research, where we're doing polling on a project or a candidate or a piece of legislation, that's typically over the course of, let's say, 4 days or 7 days or something like that. We don't tend to we'll tell the client, hey, it's going well. We're in the field, expect stuff in a week. But we don't tend to give daily data, because those numbers can shift, because we balance those data on age and gender and party.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And so on day 2, I may be way heavy on women and maybe way under on Democrats. So like the data is not going to be relevant until we balance that out for all those demographics. So it would be kind of like not so smart to share that data early, because people get all hyped up, even though we tell them it's not accurate yet.
So the use of like overnight polling or snapshot polling, like you should kind of take that like with a grain. I mean, it is data, but you should be not.
I mean, if you're planning for that, if you're planning for daily tracking, you can balance on a day-to-day basis.
Got it.
Looking back, like compiling like a day or two in the past with that day, and you can balance it. But typically, most people, I mean, unless you're running a gubernatorial campaign and you're in the last 2 weeks, or you're trying to program a $5 million ad buy, you're probably not going to do daily tracking. It's just not a typical thing. Brand tracking happens, and on a national basis, and that again, there's that dashboard kind of a thing where everybody sees it, so that can happen. But on like a policy issue in a political subdivision, like a county or a region or a state, you're probably going to be about a week out before you see data.
As a normal American myself, right? Should I engage with pollsters? I mean, you mentioned the consumer, like the transaction stuff. Like I'll get an email from a brand, maybe some of your clients, like, how was your, check-in process? Or I did a bank transaction. Like, how was your experience? And sometimes I'm like, dude, I don't like have time for this. Or, I mean, am I just cheating myself? Like, should I participate in more polls?
Yes.
No, but seriously, I mean, is it like, am I missing an opportunity to maybe like actually contribute and be positive and provide data, right?
People ask us all the time, I would never answer the phone for a pollster. I don't do this. How do you get accurate data? It can't be right. Why do people respond to polls? They care about the subject matter. They think it's their civic duty or their duty to kind of respond to the brand that they have an attraction to. I like Apple. They're Apple. I'm going to tell them what I think. Or they're bored. Whatever the reason is that you're going to participate is fine with me. So yeah, I think there's all kinds of rationales for it. I certainly think we should all kind of make our voice heard. I think I know from our client standpoint, they take this data and take action. Right? We want to present actionable data, and at some point, if we have a client who doesn't take our data and use it, we sometimes fire clients because it's not that exciting to be a part of a process where it just kind of goes and sits on the shelf. So yes, I think you should be more participatory in research, and it will come back and be a positive experience because if you're spending money on research, that organization is going to take it to heart. They're not generally just throwing it away.
All right. Well, you've changed my opinion. I will contribute. I'll participate more. I want to talk about you as like an entrepreneur, executive. You're based in Orange County, California, in Newport. You told me you've got clients, but also other members of your team, colleagues on the East Coast. Just can you talk about how do you manage yourself? Like, if you're doing polling every day, I mean, I can only imagine your dashboard or your whiteboard. I mean, that just keeping track of that. I assume you communicate a lot by email. Like, can you just talk about how you, as an executive, or things you've learned over the past few years?
Sure. Yeah. So we're a virtual company. We've got offices in DC and San Francisco and here in Newport Beach. But our staff is all over the country. In fact, I don't care in the world where you are if you work for me, as long as we get work done. We're a Zoom shop, so not everybody knows this, but Zoom is like a better version of Slack. Because you've got the video component, you've got the chat component, we've got channels for all the different things we do, and it is the best tool. So we internally have almost no email communication. We're all chat on Zoom. So the only inbox stuff we have is from clients and to clients, and that's like a really makes our much more efficient. And I'm pretty much up with my East Coast staff, and we've got some international staff too. And so depending on what's happening, we'll have. Try to find coordination time to meet. My staff is on Zoom, kind of like as if they were in an office for most of the day. And I jump in and out as necessary to be a part of that call. And it really, to me, I highly value collaboration. So that's really what that's about. A lot of the time they're just sitting there working away and, for 20 minutes, 30 minutes without saying anything to each other. But when that moment comes where you need to just gut check or reference something, they can easily do it and not have to worry about making that call or sending the email and waiting for a reply.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, I love it. You don't care. Two things. You don't care where the pollster recipient is or where your employees are, and you're going to find them. I mean, like the smartphone has really changed the game and these devices. And yeah. Before we wrap up here, any client you want to do polling for? Ooh. I don't know if you can say, or is there a topic like that you just haven't worked on yet, or or is there a company you're like, give me a call, man, we can definitely help you? I don't know if you can say that, but like, is there a dream project? Is it like arts or culture, or I don't know, anything like tourism? Like, I don't know.
Well, we've had maybe 3 Hawaii projects, and I really want some more Hawaii business. I'm like, I pursue Hawaii with vigor. We just got our first Alaska project. The City of Juneau, Alaska, is a client.
Nice.
That was kind of cool. No, I'll tell you, we have some of the most amazing clients. We do work on things like ending childhood drowning. and helping people who were previously incarcerated get back reintegrated into society and get jobs. Like, we have really cool projects like that.
Yeah, amazing.
So, like, super fulfilling. So I think we pretty much have the kind of people we want to be working for, and we've got, and if we don't love working with a client, we tend not to work with them more long term. So no, we got the good stuff. It's kind of fun.
No, I love it. That's great. Well, Adam, thanks for making the time, man. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, appreciate it, Mark.
Ciao.
See ya.